Good afternoon. I hereby call this September the 14th meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Due to the Safer at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. Committee members for the Public Safety Committee are the Vice Chair, Councilmember Jeff McIntosh, Councilmember John Larson, Councilmember Morticia Parman, and myself. Before we begin, members of the committee, if it's okay, just a quick note that we've been reading about the census. Just want to remind everyone that the deadline to complete the census is only 16 days away. We wanted to mention that there's still time to respond to the census. Not only does the census determine our representation in Congress, but it also ensures that Forsyth County and North Carolina and Winston-Salem, that we get our fair share in billions of dollars of federal spending for local programs like road construction, emergency services, Medicaid, and school lunch programs, along with housing programs. Nearly 40% of Forsyth County residents have not responded to the census. I'll say that again. Nearly 40% of Forsyth County residents have not responded to the census. So we want to let you know that the deadline to respond is September the 30th, 2020. You can go online to my2020census.gov or call 1-844-330-2020 and follow the prompts. We want to ask you to please answer the census because you do count in Forsyth County and particularly in Winston-Salem. For those who are listening, we want to welcome you to the meeting. There are only 2 items on the consent agenda, and the way the consent agenda works is items are approved with one sweeping unanimous vote unless a member of the council or committee wishes an item to be pulled for consideration. Item C1 was approved in finance. With that being said, members of the committee, is there anything on the consent agenda that we should have pulled for further consideration? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
The agenda has been motioned by John Larson and seconded by
McIntosh.
Councilmember McIntosh. All in favor? We'll go to the roll call. Vice Chair McIntosh.
Aye.
Councilmember Larson.
Yes.
Councilwoman Parman.
Aye.
And it's aye for me, so the consent agenda is approved unanimously. There are 2 items on the general agenda. We'll move to the first item, and we'd ask the city clerk to read the item, please.
Item G1, resolution against gun violence in the city of Winston-Salem.
I'd like to turn the conversation over to Assistant City Manager Tasha Logan Ford, who will give us the background on this particular resolution.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor, members of the committee. The item before you in regards to the resolution against gun violence was first presented to City Council during the August 17th regular meeting. At that time, the council decided to refer this item back to committee for further discussion and recommendation. In addition to the item that was presented for City Council consideration, there was also a resolution that was adopted by the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. This was done on August 27th, and a copy of that resolution is also provided in your agenda packet. The resolution that you have before you was drafted in large part by Councilmember Scipio, and at this time I will defer to Councilmember Scipio if there is any specific information that she would like to share as relates to the resolution. And also the full resolution has been provided as part of the agenda packet as well. It focuses on thinking through strategies to address shootings, gun violence, the rise in violence that we've seen in our neighborhoods, and thinking about those strategies so that we can ensure the economic, social, and economic vitality of these communities as we move forward. So Chairman Taylor, with that, I will defer to you as to how you would like committee members to address this item.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Ford. I'd like to recognize Councilwoman Scipio, who brought this resolution to the full council for consideration. Councilwoman Scipio.
Good evening, council members and Chairman Taylor. This is important that we have a renowned police department. They do a lot of work in our community, but we're also seeing an increase in various crimes. And when I brought this to the council, it's to serve a couple of purposes. One is that we recognize that public safety is a main issue in our community. It is one of the things that takes our community and makes it unique among other communities, that we do have safe neighborhoods. However, when we have neighborhoods where we're seeing an increase in crime, it makes all the residents unsafe and uncomfortable. When it comes to our police department, they have shown great professionalism in how they manage and handle lawlessness in our community. We have not had major outbreaks between our officers and our residents. It is important in this climate that we're living in that we respect both the residents. If there is an issue or a situation, they call 911. And our officers respond to those calls mostly with dignity and courtesy. They absolutely de-escalate many of the situations that they're called on. But we're having now a sense of lawlessness that it's important for us to, as leaders in this community, commit to what we're paying for. We're paying for public safety. And our officers need to know that we respect them and their professionalism in handling the situations that we are encountering. We're encountering a lot of violence that we've not encountered before. So with this resolution and in working with other groups in the community and agencies, moving forward to continue to maintain a safe environment that people feel comfortable in. It's important that all of our residents, as well as our employees, know where we stand. And so it's important that we support our police department, that we have a very strong, professionally trained officers, and they have been that way for many, many years. Many of the problems that other cities are encountering is because here in Winston-Salem, we were very proactive 20 years ago. And so we've brought forth lots of training for our officers. And we must respect everyone. We must respect all of our residents as well as our employees. So with this, I certainly believe that as we move forward, that our police department understands that we are supportive of their professional efforts as we move into difficult and uncharted waters when it comes to crime in our community. So with that, we brought this resolution for that so that the community also knows that we support our police department and all of our public safety members. This is not to say that if something tragic happens, that we would be mindless to anything, but it is to give them support for their high level of professionalism that they have given us over the many, many years that we have done diversity training, we have had sensitivity training, and that we really have done an excellent job. Our police do a lot of community work. Doesn't mean that we are through with that or it's not enough, but this is just to make sure that they know that the leadership of the city is supportive of their professionalism in how they handle and have handled situations and will handle them in the future.
Thank you, Councilwoman Scipio. I just want to state for the record that I do believe not only do we support the police, we support the fire department, emergency management department, and all public safety personnel. We also support the members of this community who have been challenged with the increase in crime and gun violence. The resolution that we have before us, members of the community, is simply against gun violence in the city of Winston-Salem. After reviewing the language, I have not found anything in the resolution to be egregious, but we wanted to open up the floor to the members of this committee to be heard, to see if there's anything that we might need to adjust before moving to approve this particular resolution. So the floor is open for anyone who wishes to be heard. Councilman Larson. You're on mute, Councilman Larson. If you can hear us, you will need to unmute yourself.
How about that?
Okay.
I very rarely get to talk. This committee has a long history of supporting our first responders and our police, and I think our chairman is to be commended for the work that has been done over the years. In looking at this resolution, it's simply an affirmation, I think, of two things. One, of what the city hopes to be in design. If you look at the words, that talks about health and safety and well-being of the citizens. It talks about a successful city to be built. This comes directly out of our guidelines and our aspirational statements of the city. And I think that's a powerful statement. I think also it begins to recognize that we do have some problems in the city, particularly with gun violence of late. We have taken on over 1,000 firearms have been confiscated or will be confiscated shortly within the city. And that's a lot of weapons out on the street. And we know that's a problem. If you actually look at the final resolution, where it says, now therefore, and let me just read that to be clear to the public so they understand what this is. It says, now therefore be resolved that the mayor and city council of the city of Winston-Salem support the Winston-Salem Police Department to utilize all laws and resources, including collaboration with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, as well as state and federal resources to reduce gun violence in our communities. And that's simply put. And I think that's a well stated, and I certainly would want to support that.
Thank you, Councilman Larson. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard this evening? Seeing no one else, I would entertain a motion on the floor at this time.
So move approval.
It's been moved by Councilman Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, my apologies, Councilwoman Parman. Well, before we move to Councilwoman Parman, let's get a second on the floor, and then we move to discussion.
I did do the second.
We are together. Thank you so much. So motion by Mr. Larson, seconded by Councilwoman Parman. All in favor of approval of this resolution, please say aye. We're gonna go down the roll call. Councilman McIntosh.
Aye.
Councilman Larson.
Yes.
Councilwoman Parman.
Aye.
And that's a yes for myself. So the item passes through public safety unanimously, and it will move forward to the next city council meeting, which I believe is going to be on Monday. Item G2, please.
Item G2, discussion of neighborhood feedback regarding crime and gun violence.
And just like we did for the last item, before we move forward, I just want to take a moment and queue up Assistant City Manager Tasha Logan Ford to give us just a little background information about the item.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor, members of the committee. Item G2 addresses how we're receiving feedback from specific communities that are experiencing gun violence or an increase in violent crime in their communities. And Councilmember Taylor, I know that you shared with us that there were conversations that you held with your colleagues around how feedback should be gathered in specific communities where there were areas of concern. There were a variety of different methods that could have been used, and I believe council members chose to interact and gather feedback from their communities in a way that they felt it would be received. There is one particular method that we'll share tonight. We have Scott Tesh, our Office of Performance and Accountability Director, with us. This is the result of work that was done in Councilmember Taylor's ward. As part of the Peace Walk process, there was a survey that was conducted, and there was a short survey of questions that was provided as part of the community feedback that was held in 3 separate communities. In addition to the comments that Scott Tesh will share about the informal survey that was conducted, if there are other methods or other members of the council or committee that also interacted with the residents, Councilmember Taylor, I'll defer to you as to how you want to receive the comment about those other communities and the feedback that was shared with those members of council. So at this time, I would ask Scott Tesh if he would share the information that we collected through the survey instrument. Scott.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Tisch.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor, members of the committee and council. As Ms. Logan Ford expressed, at the request of Councilmember Taylor, the Office of Performance and Accountability assisted in developing a short survey regarding perceptions of crime, the presence of law enforcement, and strategies that could be implemented at a neighborhood level. Surveying was done in paper and online formats. Volunteers were used to assist in data collection, and want to note here that respondents were obviously self-selected here. So the results of this are not what we would call statistically valid, like the full resident survey that we do each year, and can't be generalized to the entire population of the city. In total, 90 responses were collected from 3 neighborhoods generally, East On area, Salem Gardens area, and Cole Village area. Each had about 30 responses. There were 3 multiple choice questions that began the survey. First question asked perceptions about whether violent crime was increasing in the neighborhood. Almost 90% of the residents said that they felt that violent crime was either slightly or significantly increasing in their neighborhood. The second question, very similar, but asked about gun violence. Likewise, almost 90% said that they felt that gun violence was either slightly or significantly increasing in their neighborhood. And then question number 3 was about police presence and whether there was support for additional police presence in the neighborhood. And just over 70% said that they could either support a slight or significant increase in police presence in their neighborhood. Question 4 had both a multiple choice and an open narrative response. So question 4 asked about strategies that might be implemented at the neighborhood level. 21% of the 90 respondents said that they could be in favor of a gun buyback program. Just over 40% said that there needed to be additional collaboration with nonprofits in the community. And nearly 40% also said that they'd like to see additional youth programming in the community. The open-ended part of question 4, as well as the open-ended nature of question 5, which asked about strategies in general in the neighborhood, we took those responses and then thematically summarized them. And so I'll give you the high-level summary there. 18 responses were related to additional recreation and parks amenities or programming. 18 responses were related to general youth or community programming. There were 8 responses related to community-based policing or other law enforcement strategies, 8 related to housing, security, and lighting in the area, 5 related to transportation, jobs, and employment, and then another 5 that were related to traffic safety. And I can provide the full list of all of the responses, but that generally summarizes the responses that were taken from the 90 respondents in the survey done in the Southeast Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Tesh. I just wanted to say what we wanted to do because of COVID-19, we can't expect everybody to come down to City Hall. So essentially, we wanted to take the community meetings to the community, find out what they felt was necessary in order to reduce crime and gun violence in their communities, and put together strategies in order to address exactly what Mr. Tesh presented in this presentation. So I do believe that ultimately this is going to be helpful with making some adjustments. I want the council and the committee to know just to be looking out for resources and strategies that will come before this committee and other committees. And we'd like to see this done in every other community. So the item in G1 was just talking about gun violence. And, you know, we support law enforcement. We know that law enforcement can't do it alone. It takes community pulling together, finding comprehensive neighborhood approaches to solve crime and gun violence. And we talked to hundreds of people. And as you heard, there were only 90 surveys that came back, but we spoke to hundreds of people. Some of them did not want to be on the record, but it was good to get out in the community, roll our sleeves up, and find out what the people in our community want. We're happy to do it in other neighborhoods, but we wanted to start as a pilot in these 3 areas, East On, Salem Gardens, and Cole Village. And we look to sort of expand if other council members are interested going forward. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard regarding the surveys that came back from the August 29th Peace Walk, or any information that should be discussed today regarding crime and gun violence and reducing them in the city of Winston-Salem? Councilwoman Parman.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor. I applaud you for doing the peace walk and getting the data back as it relates to Easton and Salem Gardens and Cove Road Apartments. I know over in the Northeast Ward, and what I would say first is each ward has its own triumphs that it has to overcome. Everybody deals with their own set of issues. In the Northeast Ward, I've been out there even before I got on city council, talking to the residents, trying to figure out what are the pros and what are the cons, what do we need, what are we missing? Where is the disconnect between, the education, the crime, jobs, and other resources that's needed in our communities. Since I've been on city council and engaging with the residents in the Northeast Ward, one thing that I can definitely say is police presence in the Northeast Ward is definitely one of the highlights that the residents have said that they needed in our area, considering that we have such a larger gap with other wards as it relates to not just gun violence, but violence in our community. So for the Northeast Ward, just in 2020, we've already had 6 homicides. We have 273 aggravated assaults. We have 264 burglaries. We have 488 offenses with drugs, 9 kidnappings, 82 runaways, 718 simple assaults, and 404 weapons violations. But with the totality, we have 7,665 offenses in the Northeast Ward, as relates to other wards that have a little over 5,000 or 6,000. So I'm definitely in need of not only just the police, but resources as well. But I can say that we have 10,000, and it's an exaggeration, but we have 10,999 nonprofit organizations that get funding for these resources. So at some point in time, we have to hold these people to get the resources to them, whether it's coming from the city, whether it's coming from the county, whether it's state or federal funding, to do what it is that their mission statement is for them to do. Because what we can't do is fix everything as much as the city wants to. We don't have the capabilities of being able to do everything by ourselves. So it's time that we do call in other, entities to be able to come and help with the solutions to these problems. And I don't think that adding more social programming is actually what the key is going to be to save some of these issues, because again, we can keep adding social programs, but what are we actually going to get out of social programming where we don't have people who's showing up to these social programs, or we don't have people who's aware of the social programs, or we don't have people who actually get the funding in these nonprofits that's actually putting back into these communities that's actually needing it. And I'm one of the wards where we have a high volume of crime. So I can't just say, let's put it with social programming on it and it's gonna make everything okay. I'm not against social programming, but that can't be my source of what my solution is as it relates to just that, because it has to go back to other things, whether it's the foundation at home, making sure that our people are well educated, have accessibility to these resources and know what's afforded to them, instead of just, I don't know what the fix is. I can't say I have a easy fix or a solution, but I know we have the Citizens Investment Review Committee who's looking at doing the thing, something with poverty and social justice. But is that enough to fix the problems that we're dealt with right now when you're talking about children that's at home teaching themselves? And in 5 or 10 years, those will be the very people that we're trying to employ here in the city of Winston-Salem that won't be equipped because they don't have the skill set to do that. Now, understand we don't govern the school system, but we have a lot of things that we have to take into consideration when talking about how to address this violent crime in our community, and it has to do with your housing development. It has to do with housing authority. It has to do with mental health, public safety, public health. It's all different variables that tie into this community. So I understand the concept of the survey. I just don't think that, for me, I guess the question would be, ultimately, what are we going to get out of it? So the surveys are done. We know what the community wants, or you know what your ward wants. I know what my ward wants. How do we provide with what their wants are? So I guess that would be my question.
I think that's an excellent point to bring up. Here's one of the things, Councilwoman Parman, that we both agree on. Now, everything you say, I can say we didn't quite agree on everything, but what we can agree on is you just can't simply police or arrest your way out of the situation we're in. A lot of the situations we're in communities that have high crime and gun violence is socioeconomics. So I think, number one, we're taking a look at how we allocate money to community agencies. Right now, I know that the city manager's office have meetings set with many of the council members already to have that discussion. And we need to make sure that the money that we're giving to the agencies get to the communities that need it most. So your answer was, what will we do with the feedback? We will take the feedback from the surveys and make sure that the communities who are requesting resources and help and law enforcement, that they get exactly what they're looking for. The point of it is, it's difficult to speak for a community that you have not spoken to, that you have not heard from. So it's important to get out into the community, talk to them, find out what they need, and simply go back, fight for your area, and make sure they get what they deserve. So I don't want to usurp all the time, but I'm happy to have the discussion. Mr. McIntosh has been patient, but we can revisit this after his comments. Councilman McIntosh.
I want to chime in with Councilmember Parman. It's a very complicated issue, but I also agree with what Chair Taylor just said. We have to ask the question. I mean, I've said this a number of times. The most difficult part of being on city council is effectively communicating with people in your ward, knowing what's on their mind. I just don't think we can ever stop reaching out and just asking people what are their concerns, what are their needs. We are not going to be able to fix all of them, but it's just with all the methods of communication we have, it's still really difficult to know what's on people's minds. So I applaud the effort to get out in the community, knock on doors, and just find out what's in people's heads. Like Councilmember Parman said, we're not going to be able to fix them all, but it's good to know where they rank so we can start to prioritize some of them.
Councilman Larson, then I'll see you, Councilman Scipio.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for doing the survey and asking questions. It is a snapshot of one little part of the city and one little area of problems that you're dealing with. I think it's fairly universal throughout the city. My contention has always been that crime doesn't know the South Ward from the Southeast Ward. I mean, it moves across the city, and we have to look at the bigger picture on this thing. But I think the problems that you've identified are universal. I know that the city, the police department produces statistics, and I think it would be useful. I'd be delighted to get informed a little bit more about some trends that we're looking at and trying to understand exactly, how deep the problems are and whether there's isolated to certain categories of crime. I know the statistic materials available. I think the sheets that I've seen are some 28 different categories of crimes and over multiple years. And if we could get a citywide assessment of those crimes based on all the wards combined, let's back off a little bit and look at the whole city and see if we got categories like gang crime, for example, is throughout the city, but maybe isolated in specific wards. I'd like to get a little better handle on some of that and understand the categories and then a little bit more about what the trends are. We get a lot of static. We get, this is really bad, or this is getting worse, or this is getting better. It's perceptions, it's feelings. And I'd like to get a stronger database for me to be looking at to actually know whether or not we're seeing increased crimes in larceny or in auto theft or whatever we're looking at, other categories of things. The city could provide that. I think that would be extremely useful. I do think that the police department has a terrific job to do, and I'm continually amazed at how quickly they're able to solve some of the crimes that we've seen, particularly some of the homicides that the police department have gotten in there, and through evidence, cooperation of citizens, cooperation of the investigative departments within the police department, have been able to actually make some fairly decent arrests on the matter. But going back to this basic list of crimes that are committed and crimes that have been identified and arrests presumably have resulted in arrest of some sort, things have gone to court. Is it possible that we could get any kind of information on convictions or actual sentencing that has occurred on some of these categories? For example, if we say we've got 15 burglaries, we've got 100 burglaries, how many of those burglaries have resulted in arrest, for example, do we have within the city? Do we have that kind of information? And then out of that information, how many have actually resulted in convictions? Have we been able to actually, and then the next question will be, as we bore down to this, and I don't expect this all in one report, but as we bore down on this, what are the courts doing about all of this? Because maybe part of our issue resides in the conviction rates in the courts themselves, but we need to be armed with understanding the number of arrests that are made, how many convictions are coming out of that, and then what the courts are doing about those convictions. So if we could go back and get a stronger database, a bigger picture over multiple years, I'd say we ought to go back at least 4 years, maybe 5, to get see if we have trends developing in the city, and then how we're responding to that in arrest and in convictions and in sentencing. That would give us, I think, a more truthful picture of where we are.
Thank you, Councilman Larson. And we'll see if we can't try to pull as much information as we can get together. I know I'm gonna come to the chief in a second if she wants to be heard, but I do know that we can pull together the information on arrests like we've done with some of the other offenses, but it's gonna take some interagency collaboration to get some of the convictions and other things with the DA's office and some of the other agencies in the state.
It's complicated, and I understand that. I don't expect immediate response, but I think if we're going to look at, I think there's other sides of this story, and it has to do with arrest, convictions, and sentencing, and for the public to know that the total picture of our justice system is performing, how that's performing for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Larson. And Chief, did you want to be heard on that, or did we hit it right on the head? It's going to take some interagency collaboration if we're going to go to convictions, but as far as arrest, we can try to put it all together and get Mr. Larson what he needs. Is that correct?
That is exactly right, sir. We'd be more than happy to get that information for you, but it is going to take some time. And also it is going to take some collaboration between some of the other agencies. Of course, it'll be pretty easy when we're talking about just the homicides. But when we get down into some of the more aggravated assaults, particularly, that's going to be extremely difficult. But in some of the other crimes, we can certainly get that, but it will take some time. We'll be happy to report that back out to you.
I understand that. And I know it's a moving target as well, because at any given time, things are in the court system and you're solving crimes as we go along. But to understand that a little bit better, your process as to how it goes. For example, we say there's X number of maybe kidnappings or forgeries or larcenies or whatever, you give me a report. Those are the crimes. There's more to the story than that. You've made arrests against those, and we've made prosecutions against those. And I think more than trying to identify the crime, part of what we're trying to do is identify the solution. And if we're having problems with solutions in homicide, for example, if we're having problems with solutions in larceny or burglaries or whatever, then at least tells us maybe where we need to put more resources or what we may want to do to work on that. And the residents will know also maybe where the vulnerable parts might be for us to address those concerns. It just gives us a little stronger picture of how effective we are in what we're doing.
Thank you, Councilman Larson. And as we pull that information together, Councilwoman Scipio, you've been patient. I'm coming to you, I promise. I just want to say really quickly with the conversation that according to the U.S. Department of Justice, and they came out with this comprehensive report that shows crime and ways and strategies how we can reduce that crime and gun violence. The crime reduction strategies that tend to have the longer term effects are the ones that have at least two critical elements. And that's one, community engagement, And two, there's going to be partnerships. And when I say partnerships, we mean partnerships with the nonprofit community, partnerships with government, and partnerships with community organizations and law enforcement. So it has to be a comprehensive approach for it to work. The data's there. We've heard from some of the communities. We'll get out and hear from others, but it's going to be our priority to partner with law enforcement and members of the community in order to solve the problems that exist. Councilwoman Scipio, you've been so patient. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you. I wanted to say it does take a village to raise a child. That we've heard that for years. We don't need other programs. What we need are people who love our children, who love each other. It's about building people in this community. What is very, very important is that as leadership, we must set the tone for what we want to see in this city. Our city and its residents must be clear about who we are, what we want to be, and each person's role in it. Otherwise, someone is going to be lost as we move forward. So we have lots of inequities in this community, in this city. They've been coming over the years. Some have been there for many, many years. We know where crime is. We know where violence is. We have the data from our police department. They can pinpoint exactly where these offenses are taking. But we must speak to all of the people in the community. The concern I have about the work you did, Mr. Chairman, is that you went to 3 neighborhoods. And that's great to talk to those residents, but the impact of crime is outside of that neighborhood also. What I did for the East Ward, I went into the surrounding neighborhoods to see that impact, not just focusing on where we know it exists or because it's a higher crime rate there, but crime spills over, and social programs targeted to any one group does not impact the entire city. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about broadly. What is that vision we want for this city, for all residents, regardless of income? Because when it comes to equity, we may have to do more in some neighborhoods than we do in others. But it's very important to unite and bring the whole community together because this city is about that whole composite of many, many neighborhoods and many residents, different economic levels. And we just need a vision. And I would like for our public safety area to think about what they believe would be the most impactful activities that they could do within their professional sphere to improve relationships. We're paying them. They're with the people all the time. I do know there are many resources that we have in the city. And I would like to really say that before we build new programs, look at the old ones. We have funded many, many social programs. See how they're working, why they're working. And those that aren't, they don't get funded. But I think we need to take a broader look at the kinds of investments we make in our community with taxpayer dollars in terms of actually eliminating the issues that we're facing. And first, we need to really define clearly what the issues are and the problems, and then get for solutions. Because we're just scattering. We're just doing BB gun shooting, but not really focusing on something significant that will make a big difference in whatever this issue we're having. If we're having gun violence, it's got to go to all of the areas where we're having gun violence. And whatever that's going to take, we have to be in agreement that we're going to actually say, this is our goal, and we're going to move forward, not just a little here, a little there, a little there. Otherwise, the problem never gets taken care of. And I would like for us to think about these surveys that we do, that we are not wording them in such a way that the response is what we actually want to hear, as opposed to wording it in a way that we can get an unbiased review of whatever it is that we're looking for.
Thank you for your comments, Councilwoman Scipio. We'll get to you, Councilwoman Parman, in a second. I think that based off what I've heard, you and I do have some fundamental philosophical differences in opinion. I respect your year of service to the city council, but there are many of us who've been at this for 10 plus years who have a better understanding of what needs to be done to reduce crime and violence in the community. I think it's sort of the difference in conversation between all lives matter and Black lives matter. I do know that all communities matter, right? But we have several communities that specifically have challenges, who might not have rec centers, who might not have playgrounds, who don't have after school tutoring. And it's incumbent upon this council and the individual members of this city council to do something about it. As we started off saying, every community is different. There's going to be a tailor-made plan for every community, but it's not the responsibility of public safety personnel to pull that together. Everybody's elected individually from their community. And if there are challenges in your community, we need to come together, but we should also work to tailor fit solutions to the problems that exist. Councilwoman Parman.
Okay, so with this, I heard everybody, so I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but and I respect everybody's thoughts and opinions. However, back to this Citizens Investment Review Committee. So I have a question about that. I know it's for, wait a minute, I know it's for poverty and social justice. So with it being for poverty and social justice, with the issues that you have faced in those three areas in your neighborhoods, would the funding from that committee help fund the programs in that area as it relates to resources? Or will we have to set aside a different pot of money to begin to target the different disparities amongst the different wards? You follow what I'm saying?
I do. The Community Investment Review Committee has been charged with making recommendations on social justice programs and other programs that's going to reduce crime and violence. We haven't heard their report. I think just the same thing we're doing here today. Before you make a decision about what should happen in the city, you should speak to the people who you represent. The CERT committee was put together, comprised of people who we represent in this community. We must listen to them first, then make an informed decision. So I didn't prepare to have the discussion on CERT today. I'm happy to do that. This was more simply geared towards how we reduce crime and gun violence with the neighborhood peace walks and the community correspondence. But I'm happy to look at CERT but we will listen to their recommendation. Then we will find out what we do after that. We're going to listen to the people first and we'll act second. You can't.
I was just asking.
You don't know what they're saying.
No. I was just asking, like, are we pulling? So I have needs over the Northeast Ward. I already know that the needs that I have in the Northeast Wards versus the needs that you have in the Southeast Ward and Councilmember Scipio over in the East Ward and Mayor Pro Temp in the North Ward aren't the same needs. Or they may possibly be the same needs that still require a little more funding. So do we have to go, is that pot of money not touched for what we're addressing? And do we have to go back to the Finance Committee and ask for more funding to be able to help with the issues that's going on in our areas as it relates to public safety, public health, mental health, stuff like that, because that's a lot of what the issues are. And some of the things we can't fund because, like, for instance, public health, I understand, falls under the county and stuff like that. But for what does fall under our umbrella, is it going to be funded through going back under the Finance Committee or something that's already a pot of money sitting there waiting on us to go ahead and start rocking and rolling with? Because I know what my people need. I didn't talk to them.
I wish I had the authority to speak for the entire council. If they want to give me that authority, I'm happy to take it. But I think we can't make a determination on where the money is going to go until we hear from the citizens. Now, I'd like to see that money go towards doing exactly what we're discussing today. But the truth of the matter is, Councilwoman Parman, each one of us make recommendations to the CERC committee. So there are those who represent our wards directly, and then there are folks who represent the city of Winston-Salem at large. I'm just interested to hear what they have to say and for us to make a decision at that time. So to answer your question, I love to see the money go towards providing those resources, but we have to hear from the folks who are on the committee who are a representation of the people of this community. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this subject before we move forward to general comments? With that being said, thank you, Assistant City Manager Ford. Thank you, Mr. Tesh and Chief Thompson for weighing in on it. I noticed towards the end of the conversation, the CERC committee came up. So is there any conversations that we might need to have from a public safety perspective on CERC or anything else for the good of the order at this time?
I think we need to go back and have the people, oh, I'm sorry, let me raise my hand.
Oh yeah, Councilwoman Parman.
I think we need to go back and actually look at the Citizens Investment Review Committee and make it clear about what the focus point actually is as relates to this committee and where they're supposed to not keep missing the target. Like, we're doing this for a reason. And from my understanding back in June, when we first came up with, well, I'm not gonna say we came up, but it came to the council about the resolution with everybody appointing two people, it was to definitely look at, to be realistic, the 4 wards, which is the North Ward, the Northeast Ward, the East Ward, and the Southeast Ward, as relates to poverty and social justice. But I think as the meetings have gone along, they've been derailed to something else. It is missing the target point. So somebody, and I'm the youngest on the council, so I'm gonna stay in my lane, but somebody needs to like go back into the meeting or get them back on track. They're not focused. They're not on what needs to be done, because if you look at the list of stuff that's been put out, it's not really targeting poverty and social justice, as it's gonna provide a substance in these communities that's gonna actually make a difference in the North Ward as it is in the Southeast Ward. Because if you're doing something in the Southeast Ward, how is it beneficial to something that's over in the North Ward or anything in between or citywide, instead of an individuality basis, but making something substance in the whole city?
Well, I think if we can prevent a homicide in the Southeast Ward, that definitely affects how crime is moving in other areas of the city. So I don't like calling wards specifically, but to answer your question directly, absolutely. The committee has a charge. If we find that their charge should be adjusted, if we need to go back and take a look at adding additional charges, we have the authority to do that as a city council. But I would just suggest that we do 2 things. One, we make sure that the city manager, who I'll call on in a minute, understands, what we feel the charge of the committee should be. And 2, we should wait to hear what the people who are representative of the committee and ultimately of the city have to say. So the report hasn't come back yet, and I say we should be patient until we get the information and then we move. Mr. City Manager, would you want to weigh in on that?
Absolutely. Good evening, Chairman Taylor, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee, and other council members. Had conversations in the last 2 days about this issue. I know there are a few CERC members, the actual citizen members, who have some concerns primarily about the time, asking for more time. Mr. Rao and I talked to Ms. Tony today. She's preparing a report to send to all of you in the next few days that will kind of give you a summary of where they are in the process, what some of these issues are that a few members of CERC, as well as a few council members, have brought up. So we're going to send you that summary here and see what kind of feedback we get from council as far as if there's any desire to bring next month changes. Now, as you remember, the resolution, the current resolution requires us to bring you the CERC recommendations in October anyway, but we're going to send that out now so y'all can see kind of where they are, and what the plan is to get to the finish line, and what some of the concerns are.
And I want to make sure any findings before and after that, those are brought to the Public Safety Committee for consideration. And I think the chart should be clear. We should look at reduction of crime and gun violence and justice programs. And we want to work with this community to the committee to accomplish the goals that we have as a city and as a city council. And I feel that there's still time that we can do that together. So it's a great point. Councilwoman Parman, and we'll depend on the city manager to keep us updated. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this particular issue or anything else that might be good for the order? Councilwoman Scipio.
Mr. Chairman, can you tell me how the timetable came about for that particular committee, for them to have such a short time to investigate the critical issues and then come up with ideas? I just didn't know how was October chosen as the timetable?
I think because the budget needed to be approved by July 1, we needed to make some time subsequent to around July 1 to figure out how we move forward. I can get you as much information as you need. I didn't create the information. We'll depend on city staff to get that, like they've got the other information, and we'll try to keep you updated.
Okay, because it's a real critical issue for that committee. And, you know, when we had the COVID $1 million, we sent out RFPs for groups to come in with recommendations around that. And this one we did not. We just asked for the people on the committee to come up with ideas. And I'm just concerned about, did we give them adequate time? Were they appropriately educated on what the social justice issues that we're facing in our community and which ones are the most extensive and most urgent? I just don't know if we have done them service in preparing them for doing the work that they needed to do, to come up with the best ideas for using that $1 million to have the greatest impact in the community.
That's a good point. And if I remember correctly, I think that motion was passed unanimously with all council members supporting it. But we can go back and try to find out, you know, how we got here and if we've given them ample time. And I'm sure that the council and committee will be willing to give them more time, because it's always better to measure 10 times and cut once, because you don't want to get the cut wrong, because there's too much at stake and there's too much money at stake and too many people out here who are suffering in their individual communities with crime and violence. Councilman Larson.
I think it's, thank you. I think it's appropriate that we get a state of the investigations that are going on and proposals that are coming forward at this point in time to see if we're getting the kind of proposals that we had anticipated and whether or not we do need to do some mid-course correction. I look forward to seeing the report. We hopefully this week, is that right, Mr. Garrity?
Yes, that's right.
Hopefully we'll get a progress report, and that should provide us a good insight as to whether we need to be adding time or redirecting the scope of the work. So I can't make a comment until I see that report.
And for some of the newer city council members, in the past, when situations have come up in between meetings, the mayor has convened what's called a committee meeting of the whole. And if we're going to have a discussion about CERT, I'm certainly willing to sit, if the mayor is willing to call a committee meeting of the whole to make sure we get this right. But again, I think we all agree that we'll measure 10 times and cut once. Excellent points to bring up by all. Is there anything else that we should consider for the good of the order? Seeing nothing further, items G1 and 2 have been completed and the public safety agenda has been completed. We'll consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you.